Well, hello everybody. We are officially live. And yeah, for those who are joining us, this is a live Q&A and webinar. We're going back to basics. We're talking about IVF right from the start. What is it all about? What you need to know on your journey before you get started, or if you have started already. So, and also welcome to our podcast listeners. This is episode 4 of Hatching a Plan with myself, Simon Tomes. And this is Emma the Embryologist, who happens to be my wife. Or I am Simon, who's Emma's husband. How you doing?
I'm good. Yeah.
Ready to get
Do I have to
stuck
do
in?
that bit again where I
Hang
go,
on, so
I'm Emma, I'm Simon, what? No. Okay, that's
It's
not
very
that's not
confusing.
funny.
But folks, before we get stuck in, we want to ease you into this. We appreciate it. It's a very overwhelming topic. So just to remind folks...
I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah, likewise.
I'm not quite sure why I decided to do such a broad.
Well, it's a big one, right? And we've had lots of questions. I've got sheets and sheets of questions that have come in via Instagram. So thank you, folks, for already asking your questions. Just to remind people, I am no fertility expert. I'm just Emma's husband. I'm here to amplify her voice and expertise. Emma, you have 22 years experience as an embryologist. You are a director of embryology and genetics at the Evolve Clinic.
Yeah.
So Emma really knows her stuff and has a huge passion for this topic and the world of fertility. So it makes sense for us to get Emma on this webinar and ask her lots of questions. So to get to know you, I'd love to know where you're all dialing in from. So if you want to post a comment in the chat, just say where you're dialing in from and say hello. And then also get your questions in, like Danielle has already jumped in with some questions there. So thank you, Danielle. What we're going to do, we have a load of questions that have come through on Instagram. Keep the questions coming on the chat. We'll bring them up on screen and Emma will do her very best to answer them. So we're based in Teddington in Greater London. Whereabouts are you based? Kerry and Jason from Tunbridge Wells in Kent. Good stuff. Thank you for sharing there, Kerry. A few more folks coming in. We got Artie watching from Hampshire. Lovely stuff, Artie. We do like Hampshire down on the south coast. Lovely stuff. We've got Lynette and Oliver from South Wales. Charlotte and Matt from Paisley outside Glasgow. Oh yeah, familiar with Paisley. Joining from Scotland, Aberdeen. Seppi, nice one. Chloe and Arthur here from Reading. Victoria and Nick from Leicestershire. Wonderful. So I guess if we can make some assumptions, it seems like there's some couples that have joined us.
Which is good.
Which is really good. That is really cool for those who are couples.
That makes my heart full.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. For those, we've got to support each other, right? So good on those who are in a couple situation, who are on this call together. That's fantastic. So just before we dive in, why are we doing these webinars and why are we doing this podcast? What's the reason behind it?
I think we've said this before, but we had quite a difficult road to parenthood, and I think there were so many unanswered questions about our own road, which was different, the same. I think it's half a dozen of that and 13 of the other, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it should be that hard to access information before you are about to potentially finance yourself through something that is, let's face it, can be extortionately expensive. I don't think that these questions, the really initial stuff, should be that hard to get answers about. That's why Instagram came about. That's why the post came about. That's why every waking moment I try and do something that educates in the fact that you shouldn't. This should be something we're educated about at school, but we're not.
We don't get educated at school.
Don't get me started on that.
Yeah, that's another topic. We're trying to get Emma into schools. So if you folks have any access to that, get Emma into schools, universities, and workplaces as well, to raise awareness. Absolutely. So let's get stuck in. So I'm going to go with a tricky one straight away because I think this is an important one to ask. So Emma, what is one hard truth about IVF?
The hardest truth I think about IVF is that it doesn't always work. And I think that you have to go in with an open mind that is always a possibility. It is not a fail-safe. We are not at 100%. I wish we were, but we're not. And I think that if you can somehow prepare yourself which you have to go in with hope. You have to, otherwise there's no point. You have to have hope, but you have to go in understanding that it doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah.
And it can be heartbrearting.
And you have to set that with your patients when they come in. That's the number one thing you share with them to start off with.
I mean, it's probably not the number one thing. You still have to give people hope, but I think it's about knowing what they need. But I think it would be really unfair. Like, I've heard patients say, oh, I went to see a previous doctor and they just said, don't worry, this time next year you have a baby in your arms. You can't say that because you don't know what the future holds for anyone. So you just need to be realistic, pragmatic, and just honest.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for everyone. And that's that is the hardest truth.
Yeah, that is the hardest truth. Okay, well, let's jump into what IVF is. Like, first of all, what does it stand for? How does it work? What's the process for it? We won't go into the history because I don't think we've got time to do that, but more like, why IVF? Like, what does it do?
IVF stands for in vitro fertilization. So in vitro is Latin for in a petri dish. In vivo is the opposite of in vitro, which means in a physiological body. So when we talk about things happening in vivo, it means they've happened inside you. When you talk about things happening in vitro, you talk about it being in a plastic test tube or a dish or a petri dish. So in vitro fertilization is the essence of taking gametes, eggs and sperm, into a petri dish and creating fertilization outside of the human body. Yeah. That's what IVF is. So IVF encompasses all the processes in a lab with gametes. So eggs, sperm, ICSIs, biopsy, blastocysts, embryos, all of those things. Lots of big words, which one of the questions we got onto was all the analogies, which we'll go into in a bit. Assisted reproductive technologies, ART encompasses more than IVF. It encompasses things like inseminations and people that don't ovulate having help ovulate, or timed intercourse and stuff like that. That is not IVF. That is assisted help. 1 in 8 couples will seek assisted help. 1 in 5 couples will... No, other way around.
Don't worry if you've got the 1 in 5.
Yeah. 1 in 8 couples will... No, that's right. 1 in 5 couples will seek assisted help. 1 in 8 couples will need IVF. That's the other way around. Yeah, that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And how is... So when someone says like, oh yeah, we had IVF, do they mean they actually had the technique IVF, or they may have had another technique, like ICSI is another one?
Yeah, it's all under one umbrella. So I think IVF, we need to step away from... IVF is what it stands for, in vitro fertilization. How that fertilization comes about, ICSI is part of an IVF cycle. It's just a process of achieving fertilization.
So it's a different technique.
But it all falls under the umbrella of IVF. Things like timed intercourse, ovulation induction, insemination, IUI, that is not part of the IVF process. That comes under ART, assisted reproduction.
Yeah, got it. We hope that makes sense, folks, to kind of start with the basics. And I think by the end of this session, we do hope that folks will have a set of questions that they could take to a potential clinic or clinics that they could ask. Because I think this is where it gets really useful, like the real practical stuff. Yes, it's important to have the knowledge, but I think giving folks a set of questions is what really
the knowledge
matters.
Formulates the questions.
Indeed.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think what we should do here is formulate the knowledge in words, and then I'll put a list of questions after this on Insta.
Yeah. So I think we came up with a whole load earlier on.
Yeah, I kept going and then it just got a bit mad.
There's that one. Okay, well let's we talked about the alternatives very briefly. So what would be a good question to ask a clinic then?
I think we should start with Chloe's question, actually, because Chloe's written
this one here.
Yeah, because that for me is a really, really interesting starting point, because I hadn't really thought about that. Because for me, okay, so you read it, because that's your job as the host.
Yeah, absolutely. So for listeners, this is a question from Chloe. Thank you, Chloe. What is considered a full IVF cycle? It's unclear to us whether a cycle would include only one embryo transfer or transfers for all embryos available. Good question.
Now, for me, an IVF cycle is the collection of eggs mixed together with sperm, with a group of embryos created, and that cycle completed in a process of either freezing all those embryos or transferring an embryo and freezing the rest. That is a cycle of treatment.
Yep.
If you then go on to do a frozen embryo transfer, that is a frozen cycle of treatment. But when you talk to people like myself, if I ever say to someone, how many cycles of treatment have you had? I'm actually asking you, how many egg collections have you had?
Ah, I see.
I'm trying to work out how many times we've tried to create embryos.
Yep.
Whereas I completely understand, this is where the whole PGT thing came in our previous webinar.
Yeah.
When you are having rounds and rounds of embryos put back, when I speak to people, they say, I've had 5 cycles of treatment. I think that is 1 egg collection with 5 embryo transfers.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's the language, but I'll hand up, medical professionals deal with cycles of treatment, as in cycles that you are creating embryos. So when we say you're going to have to do another cycle, we normally mean you're going to have to do another egg collection.
So question on to add to that, is that universal across clinics? So you're based in the UK, is that they use the same language, or is that miscommunication or misunderstanding?
We talk about it as frozen transfer cycles, but when we talk about cycles of IVF, we are talking about egg collections.
Okay, and at all clinics, that's universal across
generally,
clinics?
Wherever I've worked, that's how we talk about
it. Okay, got it. Hope that helps answer your question there, Chloe. Thank you for asking. Is there a follow-up one on here that you want to pick?
No.
Oh, let's just jump on in. So, okay. So, jumping in with a practical one here from Anne on Insta. How many appointments will be required days off work?
So let's go back probably before that. Let's start back to how do we start this process? So you're gonna at some point. No, let's go back a bit more. I'm gonna go back even further. Who needs it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's say that. So there's going to be people that come to IVF because they are struggling to conceive naturally as a couple. There are going to be people that come to this because they are in a same-sex relationship and thus have to use assisted reproductive technologies to conceive. There are solo mothers by choice coming to this because they don't have a partner and therefore have to access sperm and assisted reproduction. There are people coming to this pre-chemo or medical treatment that need to preserve their fertility. There are people coming to this to just preserve their fertility. Yeah. And there's probably other things that I haven't even thought about. Surgical procedures, genetic conditions. I mean, there's so many. So the first point of call would be, why are you coming to this? And therefore what your needs are. So I would say the first port of call is, once you've identified that need, you speak to your GP, and your GP will start to signpost you, dependent on your own personal circumstances, to potentially what clinics are available to you if you're seeking NHS funding. If you are not seeking NHS funding, I urge you to do your own work. There are clinics like my own clinic that will do free consultations, like 15-minute chats, try and work out very quickly what you need. Can we help you? All of those things. And there are a lot of clinics now that, instead of waiting to go through your GP, if you are a couple needing fertility support, the NHS can take 12 to 18 months to even start to see you with that. You can get into private clinics and do what's called a couples fertility review, or a female-only fertility review, or a male-only fertility review, or a same-sex couple fertility review. The reason we do these is it's because it's an inexpensive-ish way, 500 quid's worth, to get yourself tested at a level that you're going to need to be tested to seek fertility treatment. Okay.
And you have to have tests. So I'm asking the real, back to basics questions here. But could you go in going, hey, we reckon we need this type of treatment because we've done this research, we've gone through this flow chart, it's ended up, here is the thing we need. Do you have to have tests?
Yes. So you have to have a certain level of test. What I will say is, when you have those tests, are really important.
Okay. How come?
Because some of them expire.
Ah, right.
So you don't want to pay for tests too many times. So I would say, if you are presenting yourself to a fertility clinic and you're not doing the fertility review, you need to have, if you're a couple, you need to have a semen analysis done. Again, you can get these done privately. You can get home kits now for men. Yeah. I'm not a massive fan, but they are available.
How come you're not a massive fan?
Because I would prefer to see a semen sample myself, to be honest. As a reproductive professional, no amount of what's written on a piece of paper is going to replace me looking down a microscope and actually looking at it.
Yeah, looking at motility.
You will need an AMH, which is an anti-Müllerian hormone. Now, you will not be able to access that on the NHS. It's one of the very, very many things that they won't do because it's a very expensive test. However, you will find that they can be very highly priced in clinics and everywhere else. There are actually companies called Fertility that you can do a home AMH test. It's incredibly cheap comparison, and we will, as a clinic, I know I will, accept those as test results for your AMH. I would say your AMH, which is your sign of ovarian reserve, would need to be done within about 6 to 9 months before you have treatment, so that it is accurate.
So another big word there, ovarian reserve.
So how many eggs have you got left? How well are you going to stimulate if we are going to give you some drugs?
Yeah.
What does that look like? What is your reproductive function like? One blood test.
And that is, and it takes into account age?
No, it's just a blood test.
Just
it's
a blood
hormone.
test.
Yeah.
Okay.
Age is a different conversation that we have once you get in a clinic.
Do we want to talk about age now, or is that another time?
No, I think that if we get into age now, we will never finish this.
We will go beyond the hour.
So those sorts of things, semen analysis and AMH, what we call baseline bloods. So if you do get referred to your GP should give you baseline bloods, which on day 2 is FSH, LH, and estrogen. They are hormones that your GP should be referring you. You'd always have your thyroid checked, TSH, T4, T3, T3. Again, your GP will guide you on this. Those don't really expire. They are things that I would probably, when you're starting to seek fertility help, maybe within those 6 months before, those are the bloods you can have done. The bloods I would say you don't have done are when you come to treatment, everyone needs virology screening, HIV, Hep B, Hep B, Core, and Hep C. They expire after 3 months. So do not pay for them to be done until you are ready to go into treatment of that situation, because when in this country, your first round, or your first cycle, going back to that word, your first cycle of IVF, those bloods are only valid for the 3 months beforehand.
And as a reminder, folks, because there's a lot of words, acronyms in this world, right? So come back to this. This is going to be on YouTube. This is going to be available on all your podcasting platforms. So revisit this conversation again, because you're using a lot of words like, what does that mean? Like, that is overwhelming.
I'm going to post actually after this, because someone actually asked me a question about could I do an acronym thing. I did it about 2 years ago on Insta, so I just need to reflag it, like where I've broken down the glossary of terms for all the different fertility things that you'll hear these words and you'll be like, what the is that?
What does that mean?
So I have actually got them on my Insta, a load of glossary of terms of what it all means.
So
I'll reshare it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's great. So coming back to Anne's question, so I think the thing from Anne is like the appointments. It depends, right?
Okay, so it really depends on what treatment you're having. So let's go in. So say you are coming to this for an IVF, you will always need so your initial consultation, if you choose to go with a clinic, you can normally do video calls for the initial consultations, but at some point you will need a scan. Now, the NHS will do an internal scan, so a female internal scan, which is a transvaginal scan. It is a probe in the vagina that looks at the ovaries and the uterus.
Yeah.
Again, the NHS don't do the type of scanning always that we want them to do. So you probably will need a gynae scan with a fertility specialist just to check things in the clinic. So you will need to visit the clinic at some point. So most people come in. What you can do with a lot of clinics is go in on one day, the appointment, the semen analysis, the scan, see a doctor.
Get it
all done.
Yeah.
So that's your one day, and then you start making a treatment plan. Now, during your actual treatment, you, as the female, whether or not your partner or if you're on your own coming with you, whatever your circumstances, you'll probably need to be in the clinic between 5 and 10 times over the space of 4 to 6 weeks. And it really varies on what type of treatment you're having. Those appointments normally involve a scan and a blood test, and then it really depends on which clinic you're using to how accurate they are with their timings.
Yeah.
These are one of the things I would say you need to ask. How much do you stick to time? Can I have early appointments? How am I going to juggle this around work?
Yeah.
Do you have work that you can talk to? How secretive do you want this to be? These are your questions for yourself. So those are the sorts of things that you can ask your clinic. Some clinics will start at 7:30 in the morning. We start at like 7:45, and they do evening consultations and stuff like that to try and juggle around people's work. So again, that is one of the big questions that will go on our list is how do I juggle this around work? What appointment times do you offer for X? I will say that when you're in treatment, all the appointments have to be in the morning because we have to get your blood results back by the night.
I see. That's good to know. Okay, right. Well, let's jump on to some more questions. Actually, I think talking about AMH, Victoria had this question. Should we take this one?
Yeah.
So the question is, thank you, Victoria, for sharing. Re-AMH, what is the lowest you would accept for someone to do IVF?
Right. Now, this is one of the main questions you should be asking any clinic before you even walk through the door. Will they treat you? Because your AMH defines a successful outcome. The lower your AMH, the less eggs you will collect, the more difficult as a patient you are to treat, and therefore the lot of clinics will avoid patients that won't get many eggs because it affects their success rates.
Wow.
It's wrong.
That's totally wrong.
But if you walk into clinics, they will want you as a patient. But I know many clinics that won't treat anyone with an AMH of under 5.
Okay.
We will treat absolutely anyone. I've got patients pregnant with an AMH of 0.1. But that is a big question before you walk in. I know my AMH. It's a really powerful thing to know your AMH because that is one of the questions. Will you allow me to have IVF in your clinic with this AMH?
Yeah.
That's on the list.
Yeah.
So yes, in the EVWA we will. I know plenty of clinics that will treat AMHs really low. But when we talk about, as I probably very un-PC talk about cherry picking, that is what goes on. Yeah. People won't treat women with low AMHs because they are incredibly difficult to treat. There's a lot of monitoring needed. There's a lot of bespokeness needed. It's not bucket chemistry anymore. It's not, you can't sit into a protocol. You need a lot of support with women with really low AMH results.
Yeah.
So that is on the list. Will you treat me?
That's a great question. And it's, will you treat me? Here's my AMH.
Yeah.
Like that feels like the core information you need.
And remember, AMH does wiggle a bit, but not massively. So if it's low, it's low. It's never going to go from 1 to 20. You might get it between 1 and 2 or 1 and 3. So a low AMH is anything under about 4.
Right.
We consider that a low. Again, this is all age related. So if you were a woman in 44 and had an AMH of 4, you'd actually be doing quite well because it does decrease over time. It's not going to change that much. You can definitely do things to make it a little bit more plumped up, but there's not a lot. You can't go from a low AMH to a massively high.
So there's no
AMH.
lifestyle changes.
There's a little bit, like definitely nutrition helps with AMH, but it's not going to. You can't change your functional ovarian reserve that dramatically. But what you can do with nutrition and lifestyle is change the way you respond to the drugs better.
Ah, okay.
That's a whole other podcast.
Okay.
Which we will do with Melanie Brown, because Melanie Brown's a nutritionist and I plan on bringing her on and doing that with her.
Yeah, yeah.
Because she can talk through nutrition and what you can do to elevate your response to drugs. But I'm not going to go there because I'm not a nutritionist.
Yeah, let's get Melanie on. Absolutely. But thank you for your question there, Victoria. Much appreciated. Okay, let's jump back to some questions from Instagram. Okay, so... this one from Georgie we appreciated. Thank you, Georgie. Is it okay to ask 10,000 questions? You know what it is? I think it is important to ask as many as you can. Which one would you like to jump into next?
I think key lifestyle changes to help prep. I think that's a really good one in the fact that we can definitely do things to help our bodies respond. I would always say get some support from people that do all the holistic stuff. I'll be brutally honest, and I used to think it was all mumbo jumbo. I now 100% don't. Acupuncturists are actually a bit like counsellors. They're brilliant. There's some really amazing acupuncturists, especially the ones I work with in London.
Yeah.
They will talk you through. There's really good nutritional help just to help you get your body in a really good place. It's all about getting your mind and your body in a really good. This is an emotional journey as much as it is scientific, and I think it's really important that you get yourself in a place where you can accept the drugs, that whatever drugs you're going to be given, they work the best they can. But I don't know. I don't have all the answers to that. I don't know exactly what it is, and I think again it's quite bespoke to your needs. If you've got an under-functioning thyroid, the nutritionist might say do this, and so I think that's why it's really important to get that advice from the experts. But yes, definitely, if you have got the time, we always say 3 months prep before IVF for both parties, male and female.
And on that topic,
if there is a male involved.
Good question from Miss K32 about lifestyle, particular lifestyle choice. Is it okay to have the odd glass of wine now and then, both men and women?
Yeah, I think so. I think actually, even if you spoke to Mel Brown, who does like so much nutrition, she would be all about like, it's all about moderation, and actually cortisol, which is your stress hormone. If you can have a glass of wine at the weekend, I don't, you've got to live this journey. I hate that word, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Can take a long time.
Absolutely. And you mentioned about it, the emotional side of it, not just preparing your body physically.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got some thoughts around, how, if you're in a situation where you are with a partner, how best can your partner help you? Because we've got a lot of, we've made some assumptions here, but there are a lot of partners here.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I'd say probably less than 10% of the patients I see are solo mothers by choice.
Yeah.
Obviously, people doing egg freezing is different, because egg freezing, you are coming to that on your own to freeze eggs, not create embryos. I think that does fall under IVF, but slightly different aspect of what the end point is. Well, you're a partner, so I know how a partner. But what would you expect? I think. Let's throw that back at you as the partner. What would you want? What would you expect to do?
Well, I think, you'd be in full support mode, right? You'd
Hopefully.
be kind of, well, yeah, you'd have to be.
I'll tell you now, 20 years ago, it wasn't like that.
Wow.
It was, I remember couples used to walk in. It was very much seen as a female problem. It was definitely there was a lot of blame. There was a lot of fault. It's not like that now. It's not like that. And I think we've educated people enough to realise that this is, 40% of the problems I see are male fertility led, whether or not you can see it down a microscope or not. That is it. Unexplained infertility is only a fancy word for we don't know what the matter is.
Yeah.
Because we haven't done the right test, or we're not there yet. Louise Brown was 46 last week. It's not like
Louise Brown being
the first IVF baby. So we're not there yet. But
what
do you want to do?
Yeah, I think on a practical level, the partner could remind the person when to take medication, when to do injections, because there's lots of injections involved depending on the type of treatment. Actually help with the injections. I think also, you have to do lots of difficult phone calls.
Yep.
Lots of difficult phone calls. So a partner could be in a position to take that call, be on the line as well. So both of you are on that call at the same time. Because I think you've often talked about the person who's going through the treatment themselves. Sometimes they're in an emotional headspace where it's so overwhelming that they won't actually hear what they need to hear. So a partner could be the ears in that case and listen and actually take all the notes. And
I sometimes phone both people.
Yeah.
Because I either have them on speaker or I do the other one on one after the other to make sure that actually there is that continuity of support, because
absolutely,
not everyone's taking everything in when it's bad news.
Exactly. They don't want to hear what you're having to share with them.
Be at the appointments, be at the scans.
Be present. Yeah. Be present.
Ask the questions.
Yeah.
Come on webinars like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because some people find this really hard.
Yeah.
It's a really daunting process being told you need to start this process, and that's why we're sort of edging our way into the world of IVF. Be the person that does do the research.
100%. Do the research. And then on a lighter note, we've got a little note here, is to buy some pineapple socks. So pineapples are the sign of infertility treatment. A lot of folks come into your clinic with their pineapple socks on. Trying to find the light moments when you possibly can, given it can be incredibly intense and an emotional journey. So I think, looking out for your partner is essential. Absolutely. Full support mode. And also is yourself in support mode, getting support from people as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's see where we're at. We've got a few more questions coming through on the chat here. So is there one in particular that you,
just
you
go.
feel you want to
Let's pump some out.
Let's go for it. So let's go rapid fire. So Laurie, thank you for sharing. I'm going to read this one out loud for our listeners. I'm a 39-year-old woman with an AMH of 3.4 and follicle count of 4. Have been advised by GP to try to conceive naturally for a few months, but not leave it too long before going on to IVF. Would you say that 3 cycles is going to be needed, or if you can only afford to do 1 cycle of IVF, is it still worth trying?
That's really tough because, again, what Laurie's told us there is everything I need to know, that actually, given Laurie's AMH and Laurie's antral follicle count, so what that means is how many follicles are sat on the ovaries before we're able to stimulate it. It means she's probably only going to get 4 to 6 eggs, depending on what given month that is. So you're already in a position where your funnel, we talk about the IVF funnel quite a lot on my Instagram page, is quite small at the top. Now, the reason the GP has told you to keep trying naturally is actually your AMH does not determine your ability to get pregnant naturally. Because in any cycle of natural menstrual like cycle, you will release 1 egg as long as you are ovulating and ticking over. All that number tells me is what I'm going to be capable to do, or what the doctors are going to be capable to do, given the drugs. Now, the question I have goes beyond what Laurie's asked, and that is, what did your family look like when you started this journey? Did it look like 1 child? Is this secondary infertility? Because if this is secondary infertility, we would come at this with a different game. We would come at this with a different mindset, because if I'm sat in front of Laurie, who is with her AMH of 3.4, and I know I'm going to get 4 or 6 eggs, I want to know how many children you want. Because if you say to me, I haven't actually started my family yet, I'm in the mindset of actually, maybe if you could afford to do it, I probably would do 3 cycles of treatment to bank embryos and then get you pregnant with one of those embryos. Because actually, by the time we come back to you, we hopefully could get you pregnant now, but the time you come back to it, you're going to be 41, 42, so and your AMH will decline. So it's about context. Context, family, context, have the conversation. So your GP is absolutely right. Like, you trying to get pregnant month after month isn't going... You are 39. You have got the same, I think it works out about 7% a month at 38, 39 chance of conceiving. That's nothing to do with your AMH, because as long as you've got normal cycles and you're ovulating, those are your chances given your age. But then you've got to then realistically look at, what does this look like for your future? And that's the conversation to have. I do think it's worth having a go at IVF. I have had a huge amount of success with women with an AMH of 3 and above.
Thanks for asking your question there and for sharing, Laurie.
Just to go back to that, there are things you can do to prep women with low AMHs. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, because I'm not, but they have started using growth hormone quite a lot in women in the month preceding egg collection, and we are definitely getting more eggs out of people than you expect. I'm not going to go into that, but it's food for thought.
Interesting.
We are 46 years into this now, and there are things happening all the time to try and help ovarian reserve work better for us in a clinical setting. I'm not talking about in a natural setting. I'm talking about in a clinical setting. How much? Because at the end of the day, the more eggs we can get out of you, the better this is going to be in regards to how many embryos we can create. Yeah. So they are starting to use things like growth hormone and stuff.
Thanks for sharing, Laurie, and for your question. Okay, next up we have Seppi. Thank you, Seppi. Any advice for those who need to do IVF for genetic reasons to increase the chances of success? Does back-to-back egg collection help?
Back-to-back egg collections are fine. I think people used to be really scared of them. So let's talk about what a back-to-back egg collection is. Yeah. So you would do a stimulation protocol, which is you have your period normally. So let's go through a normal protocol for me at work would be, someone has a period, we do their drugs for 2 weeks, we then collect eggs, we create embryos in the lab. They don't take any what we call luteal support. So there's no progesterone. They're not having a transfer because we're testing these embryos for maybe genetic disease. Yeah. And then you have this group of embryos that are growing in the lab. And by the time you finish growing this group of embryos, they've already started their next period and they go straight into another stimulation round. Yeah. It works really well. There's no problems in doing it. It depends what the genetic problem is. It depends how many embryos are in here at the end. Because my question would then be, for example, say I've got 10 or 15 embryos, which is a hyperinflated amount, but let's just play devil's advocate. You might have enough in those 10 or 15 that you don't need to do the back-to-back. The back-to-back works really well sometimes with people with really low ovarian reserve. You can actually kick them off and they keep going to go. So the reason to do back-to-back is so that you are able to complete all your egg collections in a really short space of time before you start putting embryos back, especially when we're doing genetic testing. But I think there needs to be a bit more context there. I'd like to know how many eggs we're going to get and all of that, because then I would argue that hold fire a minute, because actually you're only talking about the space of 4 weeks before we've got all the results back and we can do another egg collection anyway. Yeah. You just wait the next bleed. So, but back-to-back's fine if that's what you've been advised to do. It's fine.
Yeah. Thanks for your question, Seppi. Okay, let's take this one from Kate. So Kate, about to do my second egg retrieval for IVF at Evil Hammersmith. No embryos to transfer, last cycle unfortunately. How to know if it is worth to keep doing more cycles or just stop? Finances being a consideration too. Thank you. Thanks for your question, Kate.
I suppose, again, this is a context thing, and I'm really sorry you didn't have any embryos. I think it would be to do with how many eggs you had, all of those things. But given that you're at the Evewell Hammersmith, we've got time lapse. So the time lapse is the incubators that we use to look at the videos. So we can have a look at them and then see how they're growing, and therefore help you make some informed decisions based on the knowledge we gain from the embryos developing and why they're not developing. I think that would be, for me, that sounds like we need to have a chat with the embryology team on this after this cycle. If, God forbid, you're in the same position, I really hope you're not, because there are tweaks that I imagine have been made since the first cycle to try and make the second cycle more positive. So let's keep our fingers crossed. But if it doesn't work, I think it would be a very good sit down with an embryology team. If you're in a position where your clinic is using time lapse and you're not getting embryos, it would be really good to sit down and go through those videos to see what they think the problem is, and then help you make forward planning, future planning, whatever that may be.
Got it. Thank you, Kate, for that. I'm going to jump to Charlotte. This is a really good question. Will the clinic train you and your partner how to do the injections? Do you get to do the first one with supervision? And just to add to that, I can imagine that's super overwhelming. It's like, oh my goodness me, I've got to inject something by myself. That sounds full on, right? And I can imagine how scary that could be.
It's a really good question, and that is going on the list. Because I don't think you would get the same. I'm not sure you'd get the same in each clinic. We do. So, and actually just to blow everyone's minds, there's about 6 or 7 different drugs with different injections. Some come with pens, some you have to mix.
So if someone's a needle phobe, like I'd freak out, right? Having to inject a partner or helping them do that.
So as a clinic, I know we've got a lot of needle phobes, and actually sometimes we do patients' injections for them, if they can. Otherwise, yes. So we always do what we call an injection teach, where each drug is laid out, and some people have to mix the drug. It really depends what drug you're on. Some come with a pen, that just preloaded pen, and all you have to do is press the button and it goes. Okay. It's not in your leg.
I know that. I was just
because you went like that, like an empty pen.
I wasn't supposed to be an empty pen. So it is in your stomach.
Can't teach him anything.
Well, no, I'm
some of them are in your some of them are in your bum, some of them are in your tummy.
I thought most of them were in your bum.
No, your progesterone tablet. So it depends what the injection is, but yes, the answer is yes. In a really good clinic, you will be given not only a full hour-and-a-half nurse's consultation to take you through what drugs you're using, but when you come in for that, what we call our baseline scan, which is the scan to make sure we're ready to start, you get an injection teach, and you get it as many times as you need it, because and actually what's really good there is if your partner comes with you, they can also help you with the injection teach.
Which we talked about, support mode is injections. Absolutely.
But
great question.
We also
Charlotte.
give you, I think one of the questions I got off Insta was about a visual and a timeline and all of that. And actually what we tend to give out is a calendar of what you're taking every single day by time, and literally
mapped out for you. Because it has to be, because timing is so crucial. You talk about timing, it's so important.
And actually I think there's things on Etsy you can buy to help you.
Oh really?
Like with magnets and stuff. I've seen them before.
Like proper planners. That's good. That's good. Thanks for your question, Charlotte. Okay, let's keep going. We really appreciate you. Keep the questions coming. We've got another 20 or so minutes to go. We can always go over the hour if people are okay to stick around. So this one from Chloe. Here we go. So Chloe asks, how much time it normally takes to have an egg retrieval since starting stimulation?
So there's 2 types of protocols that we tend to use, long and short, which is exactly what it says on the tin. Long protocols now have become, that's all we used to use back in the day.
What does that mean?
A long protocol. So a long protocol is a protocol that you start in the cycle before. So you have your period, and on day 21, you start taking a drug for about 8 days. Then you have another period, and then you start taking your stimulation.
Okay,
So actually, you could argue that you're actually in cycle for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
We tend to use, and actually the literature suggests now that short protocols are easier to manage and stop ovarian hyperstimulation a bit better. So instead of having all this build up into the cycle. And don't get me wrong, some people need long protocols. I'm not clever enough. It's to do with your hormones and your pituitary and stuff. But I would say 90% of the cycles I do now are a bleed, and you literally start injecting on day 2 for stimulation. Wow. Your answer there, Chloe, is either 6 weeks, but if you're in the modern day where we're doing it, it's actually, most people are only injecting stimulation drugs for 10 to 12 days before they take their trigger. Your trigger injection is the injection you take to start maturing all the follicles we've grown, and then you have an egg collection 36 hours after that.
Got it.
Okay, so 2 weeks.
So when people talk about the trigger, okay,
that's
an
the bit.
important one.
That's the bit that starts my process, because
Yeah.
that's when I start talking about my egg collection and going into. And maybe we'll do a thing on all of that, but that's like really common.
That's a separate one.
But essentially, if you're in a short protocol, it's 2 weeks. If you're in a long protocol, it's 6 weeks.
So, do you ask a potential clinic that? Do you say, do you run long or short? Does that matter? Or
Probably not immediately, because that's probably decided after they've met you and decided what your medical needs are.
Okay.
And that comes down to what consultants like to use, what protocols and why, and what drugs they're using and all of that.
But there's no like, someone could go in and say, I've heard short is better than long, I want short.
Yeah, of course they can, if they've had treatment before and it's worked better for them, then yes, you
so
can have
treatment before.
But I think we're coming to this as a brand new people, right?
Yeah.
No, it's probably not something.
So there's no point asking that question.
It's very bespoke. It's something we tend to use short just because it works in our setting.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Good question there, Chloe. Thank you so much. Right. Oh, and another question related to needles. So, Leanne, I have a phobia of needles. Have you got any tips or ways to overcome this fear? Well, thanks for sharing, Leanne. And I'm sorry to hear that you have a needle phobia. I would say you're definitely not alone.
No, you're not. You're not. And actually, the nurses have got some really, really good tricks and tips to help with all of this. I think there's a lot of Emula cream. I think it's called Emula cream. You can get like numbing cream. You can get ice. You can get someone else to do them for you, catch you off guard. It depends what your phobia is, to be honest. It really is. Like, some people are. I will say that the needles we use to inject the stimulation drugs are minuscule. I think people have got this overwhelming belief they're not at all. They're like tiny little pins.
Yeah, pinprick.
So I think you have to work with your team to get the support and see what advice they can give you.
Yeah.
There is a lot of support out there for people with needle phobias. I don't tend to do the injection teach, so I can only imagine. But I know our nurses have got.
Your nurses team is ace.
They're brilliant. They're
brilliant.
brilliant.
Yeah. Hopefully you can get some support with that, Leanne. Thanks for asking. Okay, another one from Charlotte. What's the full list of activities we should ask to get a complete cost for a standard IVF cycle? The core package seems to vary a lot by clinic. So this is a great question, and we were going to come on to how much does it all cost.
But this is one of the questions. Yeah. This is one of the questions. Why are you having to ask for your price that you're going to have to pay for your treatment? It should be broken down. Once you've had a treatment plan given to you, if you've chosen a clinic and you've had a consultation and they've given you a treatment plan, you should receive a full costings.
Yeah, broken down.
There shouldn't be any hidden costs.
And can you say things like, we don't think we need that, can you take that off? I know that sounds
No, really, you can. You can. There's
blood tests or...
No, so blood tests I would never... I will say that there are ways you can... There's actually really good people on Instagram that talk about how you cut the costs of IVF. So you can get certain blood tests. If your GP is really good, you can get your virology done through your HIV, Hep B, Hep C and that. Get that done through the NHS, but make sure it's just in time because it expires, like we said.
Months.
So there are things, and you can get you don't have to use their pharmacy. You can use a different pharmacy. You can get someone to write you a private prescription. But ultimately, the cost that you're paying the clinic shouldn't be hidden. You should have, it should all be written down for you.
Yeah.
That is one of the questions.
And when it comes to like surprises, like sometimes when you're paying for any type of service, there's like not hidden costs, but there's unexpected costs. Like, do you recommend like have an extra 20% put aside, or like what?
Yeah, the most unexpected cost we have is if you're booked for IVF, which is when we mix the sperm and the eggs together. Yeah. And then the sperm count on the day maybe isn't good enough. We have to convert to ICSI.
Okay, so
ICSI is when we inject the sperm into the egg. It is more expensive. It is a completely different skill set.
Because it's a much more technical.
Yeah, so that is something that can be an unexpected cost. But everything else, in my mind, should have been discussed with you at the treatment plan
Yeah.
phase. And although there is wiggle room on how much drugs you're going to need, a little bit, like that can change. Your clinic cost should have been so we give out cost pack, like we give a cost summary.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, I find that really hard to understand.
Bit of a cheeky question. Can you negotiate on the cost?
No, not really. They're set out. I mean, beyond me, I don't. Obviously, as an employee, they are set out by how much everything costs to run by clinic.
Yeah.
And actually, the blood tests, for example, we outsource the blood work, so we don't. It's just what they charge us.
Because you have different suppliers providing different services based on.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to like genetic testing and that kind of
thing. That's all outsourced. Separate
companies take care of that. You just do the
we
retrieval
do the bit.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Thanks for your question, Charlotte. Which one would you like to take next?
Probably that one.
This one here? Yeah. Okay. Thanks again from Chloe. If an embryo transfer doesn't end in pregnancy, how soon could you have a new embryo transfer? What would be your recommendation?
If it's no pregnancy, if it's a negative test, then you have a bleed and you can have a transfer in the next month, unless there is something that the doctor wants to do, like a further investigation to find out why the embryo didn't transfer work.
How often, typically, does extra tests have to happen before you can try again? Is it percentages like 10%?
I think it depends on how complex your infertility cause is.
Right.
We have patients where they have failed euploid, so tested normal embryos, and if that happens, then although they're not 100%, they're a lot closer than an unscreened embryo. So you can start to do things like look at the womb and stuff like that. But I can't talk about why they do that and when they do that.
Yeah.
But in layman's terms, you can go next month. You can have another embryo put back without too much problems next month, as long as your lining looks okay. The delay is when you have biochemical pregnancy or miscarriages, because then you have to wait for everything to settle, and that's a little bit more complicated.
And that is case by case?
Case by case. Depends how long it takes.
You can't give a rough guide. No. Okay. Thanks for your question there, Chloe. We're going to grab one from Insta. I thought this was a really good question. From Pebbles and Clouds asks, what options should we be advocating for that might not be offered routinely by the clinic? So I guess that means extras or extra services.
So this goes on my list. This is another one on my list that I think we should get to. So another list of things, the questions you should be asking your clinic. What should you be advocating for? So for me, time lapse for me is unfortunately not standard. I think it should be, and I wish that would change because it's so powerful. I don't think they're better incubators, but I do think the knowledge you gain is really important when you're growing embryos under a camera.
And just to add to that, as a non-professional in this world, I think you routinely say from a clinics you have worked at in the past which didn't have time lapse to where you are now with time lapse, you keep on routinely saying it has revolutionised.
It's totally changed my world. And actually what I understand, and actually for everyone, and like work-life balance as well. It's not just, the embryos are undisturbed, but I can actually see them from home. I could click off here right now and look at all the embryos in both clinics in London and just make sure everyone's like, I can check. And I do. Yeah, it's quite sad, isn't it?
It's not
I do that every night before I go to bed.
You check them.
Honestly, what should you be advocating for? So for me, I would be advocating for blastocyst transfers. A lot of clinics are still putting embryos back on day 3. And if they are, I'd like to know why.
Okay. So you've jumped into full-on technical terms. You said the word...
this is why you're here.
You said the word day 3. What the heck does that mean? You've said the word blastocyst. What the heck does that mean? So difference between day 3 and blastocyst? Why don't you say day something else?
So embryos start on day 0 for egg collection. Then we go to day 1, which is when they are fertilized, and then they grow and they start to make cells. And they go 1 cell to 2 cells, 2 cells to 4 cells, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16 onwards. And then once they get to day 5 or day 6, they are called blastocysts. You cannot bypass that stage. The blastocyst is the stage an embryo reaches primarily just before it is ready to create a pregnancy. if you have a group of embryos that all look the same on day 3, there is still the opportunity that some of those embryos will not carry on developing to a stage that will make you pregnant. It's called embryo arrest. It is why people get this misconception that they're not getting pregnant because they're not getting fertilization. It's probably not what's happening, because fertilization is probably going on when you're trying to conceive naturally, if you are in a position where you can. What's probably happening is the embryos are failing to grow inside you, just like they are in the dish. We're just watching it happen. So my question is, why are clinics transferring in patients that have 4, 5, 6, day 3 good quality embryos? Why are we randomly selecting? Why don't we wait longer and have the knowledge of which ones are going to grow? If the incubation is good, which in the UK it is incredibly good. I'm not going to talk about all countries, but the US, Europe, the UK, we're very, very good at embryo culture. We all very much use the same techniques. Embryos will grow to the blastocyst stage in a laboratory. And therefore, instead of picking embryo 1 on day 3, which then went on to fail, you pick embryo 3 at day 5, which has got already shown you it's much better to work. So my question to, my answer to that would be, what should you advocate for? Blastocyst transfers, blastocyst culture, the opportunity to have your embryos grown, the opportunity to have, if they get to blastocyst, then you are in a position to do genetic testing on them if you want to. And this comes down to, what questions do you ask your clinic when you walk in the door? When do you transfer my embryos? Will you make me have a different transfer if my transfer was to fall on a Sunday?
Interesting.
What day do you do egg collections? Because they're scheduling them for their workload rather than your needs. So those things are on my list. And
to add to that, does your lab have time lapse?
Time lapse is a great benefit. I don't think it's a deal breaker. It's a great benefit if you're coming to this and you've got very complex fertility problems. I think you need time lapse. I don't think you need that if you're coming to this day to day.
Yeah.
But I think day 3 versus day 5, I have known clinics to give different options to patients based on when they've had their egg collection. That is not your fault.
Oh, wow. If
you've had your egg collection on a Tuesday, you're automatically booked for a day 3 transfer because no one's working on a Sunday. That's not fair.
Yeah, that's not fair.
So why if you're having your egg collection on a Wednesday, are you allowed a blastocyst transfer? But those that, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so that's on my list.
Yeah, great question, or great questions to ask a potential clinic that you're going to work with. Okay, let's jump around here. Let's jump back to the chat, shall we? Okay, which one should we take here?
There was one right at the top.
Oh yeah, okay. You tell me when to stop.
Keep going.
Yep.
Oh no, can't see it now. It was something about, there you go. Danielle was the first question she put up. And this comes to what I just said.
Let me ask the question. So Danielle, apologies we missed this question a little bit earlier on. So thanks for waiting patiently for us to jump on this, or for Emma to jump on this. So Danielle asks, what is the difference between clinics that are cheap and those that are expensive? That is a great question.
Primarily running costs.
Yeah.
And the running costs are going to be the difference between the lab having time lapse, the skill of the staff, a 7-day service, the blastocyst culture, the ability to do PGTA, the ability to offer genetic testing. All of those things extortionately inflate your running costs.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean you may need to go to an expensive clinic.
Yeah.
That means you have to have the questions to ask your clinic to make a decision about what treatment you need.
Yeah.
So I will say from experience that there is no such thing as budget IVF. It is an expensive process. I could say, I mean, maybe I'll do that one day and just like literally go through how much we need. Like even to freeze embryos and hold them in tanks costs thousands of pounds a week just to get the liquid nitrogen in. I mean, it's unfortunately, it's an incredibly expensive business, which is why the NHS don't fund it as much as we need them to.
Yeah.
But that is it. That is what you will find. Is you'll find that maybe your less expensive clinics will have egg collections on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. is that what's best for you? What if you needed a collection on a Saturday or a Sunday? Is that going to ruin your outcome if you don't get your egg collection? Now, there's definitely a bit of wiggle room with egg collections, but there's not 4 days of wiggle room. So, you know, between egg collection on a Friday and egg collection the following Monday, that's a lot of days. So those are the questions. That's the difference.
Yeah, and I guess the level of patient care as well outside of the lab. You know, the doctor's experience, the nursing, the counselling. We haven't talked about counselling.
So that's another question that's on my list.
It's on the list.
That's on my list. Is because there isn't actually a different answer there. Your question to your clinic is, do you provide counselling? And if the answer is no, then they're breaking the code of practice.
Yeah.
You
so
have to provide counselling. We have to offer you counselling. Yeah.
And do clinics, they can offer that either like externally or they have their
we've
own
got an external counsellor.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, gotcha.
But that's on the list.
Yeah. And who sets that kind of counselling? Is that just code of practice or the
HFEA say that we all have to offer
so
counselling.
For those who are unfamiliar, HFEA stands for
Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority. It's the people we're governed by through the government. It's a government. It was a 1991 Parliamentary Act.
Yeah.
They changed their rules quite a lot, and we all scrabble around to keep up.
Yeah, of course.
But
But they state that you have to offer some form of counselling.
We have to have connection with the counsellor. Yeah.
Brilliant. That's very important. Thanks for your question there, Danielle. That's a really good one. Right, I'm doing a quick time check. So we have about 5 minutes. So let's see where we're at with questions coming through on the chat. And let's take this one from Danielle. So what tests can be done before an embryo transfer to ensure the highest chance of a successful implantation and pregnancy with endometriosis?
Okay, I'm going to remove the endometriosis because it's quite a contextual derived thing. What things can be done to do with implantation? So you could look at the genetics of the embryo, which is the PGTA, which we tend to do in women over the age of 37.
PGTA stands for?
Pre-implantation genetic testing for aneuploidies, which is women of advanced maternal age. They tend to make more embryos with genetic information problems. So you can have your embryos tested to make sure that the embryo you're transferring is viable for pregnancy.
And just to jump in before you move on, episode 3 of Hatching a Plan, if you come back to an earlier episode...
Because we like to do things in order.
Because, well, I mean, we go in all sorts of orders.
Seriously, we didn't plan this way, did
we didn't. But we have done an episode on PGT, and it's definitely worth checking out. We could probably do about 3 or 4 episodes on PGT. It's a massive topic, but if you're unfamiliar with PGT and it's something that you may have to consider, or it happens to be something you're interested in, do go back to episode 3 of Hatching a Plan.
You can also do, so if you are having recurrent implantation failure and everything else has been ruled out, you can do what's called an Emma and an Alice. I'm not going to pretend to know what it is. It's definitely to do with something with the microbiome of the uterus. And the receptor, you can do a receptivity assay, although that's been a bit poo-pooed by ESHRE, which is the European Society of Human Reproduction recently. There are also, there's things like hysteroscopies. You can have a look inside someone's womb to make sure that everything looks normal that you can't see on scan. So there are actually a lot of tests that can be done to check the implantation possibilities if something is happening and there is recurrent implantation failure with good quality assumed normal embryos.
Great. Okay, thank you for that one, Danielle. We've got time just for one more, so let's get this one in from Lou. Who Lou has also said, looking forward to the list. Good stuff. I'm looking forward to the list.
I got to write it.
It's a mega list, but we're going to get it out there. So Lou asks, if there are lots of unexplained round cells in the sperm test, does that need to be investigated before heading to IVF? If so, how?
So it depends what the round cells are. So round cells in sperm samples are either germ cells, which are the most immature sperm cell that you can have, or they're infection cells, so they're white cells. The problem is that you need to stain them to see the difference. Either scenario, you shouldn't have round cells in your sperm sample. You have a few, everyone has a few, but not if you've got loads. You need to be seeing a urologist. So to check that there's no infection, and if there is a load of germ cells in there, where they're coming from, because that's to do with testicular function. So I would be checking that you've had, you can need to get them identified as what they are, if you can, and you need to see a urologist to find out why they're there.
Yeah, so specialist urologist can look into that.
Yeah.
Got it. Thanks for your question there, Lou. Should we take this one? Should we break the rules and go over?
Go on, I can
let's
do
break
one
the
more.
rules. Let's do it. And hopefully, folks, you can stick around. We're just going to do one more question and then we'll wrap up for today. And this question comes in from Kate. How best to prepare for an egg retrieval? Anything I can do to boost success?
I wish it was that straightforward. Like I said, I think if you've got the time, then we always say try and invest in the 3-month prep. If we can. If you haven't got the time, because age isn't on our sides all the time, the best thing you can do is take your meds on time. Drink loads of fluids. Make sure you stay hydrated, because I think one of the questions I had on Insta actually was how crappy are you going to feel?
Oh, yeah.
People feel different. Like some people breeze through it and they're fine. The emotional stuff's the hardest bit. Some people find it, they make them really groggy. The best advice I can give you is keep your fluids up as much as you can. 3-4 litres of fluid, just drain it all through your kidneys. Anything you can do, a lot of it's going to be out of your hands, which is incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
All you can do is literally do the meds as you're told. Make sure that you turn up to your scan appointments, get your bloods done, and then follow all the information you're given.
Yeah, and get the support you can from a sort of a mental health perspective as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's lots of that, so we can point them in the right direction. So
absolutely.
Anyway.
Okay, folks. Well,
I could have done another hour of that.
I think we could have done another hour. Well, let me ask you one more question. Is there a question I haven't asked you or the audience haven't asked that you think I should have asked or should have been asked?
I think that the bit at the beginning probably needed to be said a bit more when you said, what is the one thing that is, what did you say? The hard truth. I think there's more than one hard truth.
Yeah.
And I think that unfortunately for patients where you have your treatment is a massive factor in your outcome. And I feel really sad that that's the case.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that by doing this and highlighting that that's the case, people can get the list, because the list is going to come because I need to put it together.
Yeah, so important.
And then you can try and understand this a bit better so you can make informed choices. And I get it, not everyone gets to choose where they have treatment, but at least you can know what that looks like. So I think the hard truth is not only that it doesn't always work, it really can depend where you go to how well you are looked after and what the chance of your success is. And please be aware of the cherry picking that goes on.
Yeah.
Because it happens.
Yeah. Good honesty. And, fair play for you for sharing that. So, folks, we're going to wrap up now. So thank you so much to everyone who has joined us live, and thank you to you, the listener, if you're listening to this as a recording on the podcast. So please do come back to this again. We appreciate that Emma has shared a whole ton of helpful information. So this will be available on YouTube. If you just search for Emma the Embryologist on YouTube, you can follow the podcast there. Or if you look up Hatching a Plan on all your popular podcasting platforms. Alternatively, you can go to hatchingaplan.transistor.fm, and that will give you a link to all of the places that you can get access to this. So this is our 4th episode. So we've also got choosing a fertility clinic, so understanding the Vienna consensus. We've also got everything you need to know about donor sperm. Plus, as mentioned earlier on, we've got one on PGT, so pre-implantation genetic testing. And as a reminder, actually, Emma shared on Insta. So if you're not following Emma on Instagram, it's Emma the Embryologist. Emma shared that for one person who signed up, you're going to pick a random person, aren't you? You're going to offer just a call. So just jump on a call, have a chat. Emma can answer your questions one-to-one. Because we're so grateful for everyone who has signed up to this session, and we do wish you very, very well. Please do stay in touch, stay connected with Emma. Genuinely, of course I'm biased because we're a couple, but she genuinely lives and breathes this world. It is her absolute passion since, you thought when you were a 15-year-old person, I'm going to get into this and this is going to be my life, my career. So this is about education. This is about supporting each other and looking out for one another. And Emma does that day in, day out. She lives and breathes this. So please do continue to stay connected to Emma. She is an awesome human doing good things for good people. But yeah, thank you. We're going to sign off now. And yeah, please do keep the questions coming.
Keep in touch. Take
Keep
care.
in touch. Take care, folks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye for now.